I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
That, of course, was Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. It was the pictures that got small. That was a veiled reference to television in 1950 when the film came out. That was a real threat to the movies then. Lately, it's been streaming that's been the major threat to the business, but and a lot of people thought that the biz was about over, that the theatrical business of showing movies in cinemas was finished. But this year, 2026 is turning out to be boffo box office. It's the strongest year for the box office in theatrical rentals since before the lockdown in 2019. Are the movies back? I'm JB Miller in London.
I'm Jim Jalamas at the Twisted Spine bookstore right here in Brooklyn. And this is Boomer Has It.
So, Jim, you've been a first-rate moviegoer lately, I've noticed. So you're like sort of exhibit A in this podcast. So what has sent you back to the movies lately?
Well, it's something to do. And, the New Yorker had an interesting essay called Craving, something around the line of craving inefficiency, which is the fact that every technology promises us more convenience and we don't get out of the house. We don't do anything. And so that's one thing. The movies I've seen, I made it to an art house film called The Secret Agent. I saw a blockbuster called Project Hail Mary. I recently watched Obsession. And the missus and I went out to see The Invite. So, part of it is maybe I hope we can touch on this is why a collective viewing experience is better than a solitary or at home viewing experience.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's really different. I mean, I'm as you know, I'm a huge movie fan. I'm a cineast. I'm a self-confessed cineast. I must have 1,500 DVDs and Blu-rays. But I do not go out to the cinema much here in London. It is so expensive, and I have a video projector and a pull-down screen.
Can I
When you
can I
go,
ask how expensive is it in US dollar terms to go to the movies?
yeah, it
Feel
is
like I'm
expensive.
asking like feel like I'm asking for trade data from a
Well, I
policy
mean, in my
government
local
representative.
in, in my local posh cinema here in Barnes in Richmond, it's gone up to £18.50 to see a film. I would guess that's about $25, maybe. There's a senior discount of £12 during the week before 5 p.m. through Thursday. Uh, it's not a very generous schedule.
Do you
12
have to have a walker to verify your age? Or maybe like, I don't
that
know, like
helps.
a
But I mean, that's
Geritol
12,
prescription?
12 quid, £18.50. It's just for and no, I could afford to go. I could afford to see a movie every now
I
and
don't
then.
think the pensioners in old London town can get to the I think it's cheaper to use Blu-ray if you're
It's
in England.
just it's well, yes, it's sticker shock because I can't help thinking, oh, if I was going to spend 12 or 18 pounds on a movie, I could get, what, 4 or 5 DVDs at a charity shop, or I could buy a new Blu-ray and watch it at home. But when you watch it at home, in my case, I'm solitary. I live alone. So I miss seeing things, especially comedies, with an audience. It's great when you see a comedy in a movie theater, people are laughing. Or if you see well, let me ask you, you saw Obsession, which is it's a horror genre. What, was the audience responding vocally to it when you saw it?
Yeah, yeah, and, although it doesn't stand out because 'cause we're all doing it together, it was very well synchronized, and, but sometimes there you'll hear someone laugh at something during a film, and it's a joke you missed, or it's a subtlety that went over your head. So sometimes you get clues about how to view a film when you're with other people. It's
Mm,
funny because I
yeah.
was talking about it with Carol, and she was mostly thinking about reasons why it's annoying to go to the theater. And,
Oh,
because someone's too tall, it's in the seat in front
yeah.
of you, or there's some guy with a noisy cellophane wrapper taking out his Raisinets, or any number of reasons, which I think movie theaters, cinemas have largely solved for with stadium seating and
Mm. Well, can I
wide
ask you,
aisles.
has the experience changed since COVID? That's what a lot of people have been saying. People were used to for a couple of years watching everything at home and being noisy and getting up to get popcorn or whatever, talking or looking at their phone. Has that spilled over still to movie theaters, or are people as attentive as they used to be? BC before COVID, if I can put it that way.
Well, I think you're about to reveal some interesting data about movie going, and I'll at the expense of giving some of it away, it tends to be generational. We have Gen Z and millennials attending the theaters, and they're famous rule followers as opposed to
Is that right?
us, as opposed to boomers who are rebels at heart and shapeshifters in form. And so, being a baby boomer, I sort of I flouted the rules that say, do not turn your phone on, or, there's a warning, there's a short warning video that you watch. I left mine on to see something, maybe the weather, and
What?
some couple of millennials said, "Turn it, they're supposed to turn it, I
Oh,
was
good
thinking
for them. I'm
I
I'm
was
I'm on
thinking
their
you
side.
the movie hadn't even started, you bastard." Yeah, no, I was
Yeah.
sort of like,
Okay,
"Oh,
boomer.
okay, follow the rules, rule
Quiet,
followers."
boomer. We're trying to watch. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I looked it up. I mean, a report recently said that 87% of Gen Zers and 82% of millennials saw at least one movie in a movie theater in the last year. I mean, that's not a lot, but it's more than none compared to 70% of Gen Xers and 58% baby boomers. And I think
So
that those numbers,
almost so 58%, that's almost half that don't go to the movies
yeah, I mean,
in
this was
in our cohort.
okay. This was asterisk here because this was a bit before this great. I don't know when this survey was done, but I mean, I think those numbers have probably gone up because people are returning to the
Well,
movie
it's
theater.
counterintuitive, isn't it, JB Miller,
What?
right? That
What's going to be
that
intuitive?
that a cohort that grew up in and saw the evolution of, film from the silver screen, going from black and white to color to the small screen on television, and then surround sound, that they've turned away from the movies. And at a generation that, at best started, the technology they saw was maybe VHS, are drawn before we are.
Well,
How do you account for that, Mr. Cineass? The
Come on. Well, VHS is going back to the 1980s, but I think it might be partly a reaction uh, to being, bored and stuck in at home. Young people are social creatures. I mean, it reminded me of I made a note of this. Success at the box office could be a reaction to people just being sick of sitting alone. And according to a Guardian article, and I think this is slightly apropos. So, according to a Guardian article, cut and paste fanzines are back. Do you remember cut and paste fanzines from the 70s, late 70s, early 80s? I think of punk zines, and remember, the cover of the first Sex Pistols album, which was cut and paste the letters, a bit
So are
like
we
a
talking about,
hostage.
like, pamphleteering for to be a stand for a film? Like, so it's like a homemade physical document
Yes.
devoted to a
Yeah,
movie or
and this is apparently, according to this article, this is a response to the slickness, the deadening slickness of AI. So, it's a reaction against that. So it's maybe they found their mothers and fathers' old fanzines, and they thought, all right, this is interesting. So it's a reaction to that. So I think maybe movie going is partly a reaction to being stuck at home, streaming with streaming series. And also the summer is when there aren't as many new series, certainly on network television and on the BBC here in England. There's nothing new. So, because they figure people are busy in the summer, and one of the things they're busy doing is going to the movie
Or the
theater.
movies. And, interesting, give a little more strength to your theory is, again, there was this article, I named it wrong. Um, it was in the New Yorker, and it was about our desire for inconvenience,
Hmm,
inefficiency. But
what does that mean?
one obstacle, I think, also for the movies also occurs on the small screen at home, and that's video games. And
Oh, right.
if it can draw people, young viewers out of the house to, 1, see a movie that they could see on streaming, or 2, playing a video game by themselves or virtually with many people if it's a multiplayer game. It's still a pretty strong some kind of strong desire to get out to see something collectively.
Well, that's a good point. I always have to remind myself about the world of video games because it's so foreign to me. I never took any interest in it, but it is a huge industry. I think it's bigger than the film industry. So,
It's bigger than the film industry, and it is
mm,
and I don't think we have any data on that, but it puts Hollywood, the ever powerful, ever reviled Hollywood, this, juggernaut of power and influence, they're the underdogs right now. The big studios are the underdogs.
yeah, right. It's funny to think of them as underdogs, but yeah, there's still a fear that the recent merger or the current ongoing merger of what is it, Paramount and Warner Brothers is going to result in a smaller slate, fewer films being released. They claim Ellison Jr., who's in charge of that, claimed that he would enlarge the slate to 30 films a year. No one believes that's possible. I think it'll be more like 12. So there are fewer films being released, although I think more films this year than last year. If I can go into a little history of film going, because I think it's kind of interesting. The peak,
I'd like to hear that history because the only thing I can imagine could make 30 films a year from a film bro like David Ellis is if it's completely fabricated and synthesized by AI, using AI actors and
yeah.
everything else.
Well,
So
that's
please,
this.
let's
That,
refresh
that,
my
yeah.
stale, ugly mind with some Hollywood history.
Well, we go back to the era of truly the film studios when they actually made films. The studios don't make films so much anymore. They release films. They may help finance films, but they don't really make them as much as they used to. Where the studios started mostly in the 1920s. By the 1930s, you've heard of this term, the factory system, and they would put out, I think, pretty much one major film a week. That's 52 films a year. Those are A pictures, so there are also B pictures. There were cartoons, there were shorts, there were newsreels. The peak film going year was 1946, the year after the Second World War. This is true
What?
both in the US and in the UK. And people went to the movies every week. And I remember, yeah, I remember even before that, hearing my mother used to recall being sent to the movies with her older sister in the late 30s. Her mother, my grandmother, would give them, I think maybe 10 cents each to go to the go to the movie theater just to get out of the house. So my grandmother could have a little peace and quiet for up to 3 or 4 hours because there'd be a main feature, a short feature, a cartoon, a newsreel, and they would give away free Fiesta ware. You've seen Fiesta ware on sale in antique stores for a lot of money. They used to be given away free at the movie theater as the selling point to get people into the movies during the the Depression. I remember visiting my grandmother and grandfather, and they still had all of these glasses and plates from given away in the 1930s at the movies. And so the deal was that my mother and her sister would go to the movie, which they wanted to do anyway. And when they would pick up the free glass or the free plate, and I don't know if that was handed them on the way in or the way out, I assume the way out, they would hand those over to my grandmother. So that was an incentive. It was a bit like you probably remember. We're old enough to remember free maps at the gas station, and I think every 8 gallons you got like an ingot, like a little coin. And I remember in 1969 they gave away free moon maps. This was an incentive to fill your gas. You had to fill your car anyway, but it was, I guess, about brand loyalty. I'm getting way off the track here. So 1946 was the all-time peak of movie going, and I think it was understandable. There was a huge audience in America. It was a very wealthy, strong economy. In England, it wasn't. There were still rationing here until the early 50s. But the movies were a great escape, and the films like the was it the best years of our lives, which was about returning GIs.
Great film. Great
Great,
film.
great film. And the film that we remember from that year, It's a Wonderful Life, was a flop when it came out. No one really went to that. But that was from 1946. That was a great year. So, that was the high point, which only lasted a few years because the at that in that period, the movie studios owned their own theater chains. They had a captive audience, as it were.
That's what we would call in the business world vertically integrated. It had vertical integration. Please
Vertical.
continue.
Yes, right, exactly. That was vertical integration, which was declared, what's the word? It was a trust. It was declared, anyway,
Monopoly?
yeah, it was
Monopolistic?
monopoly. It was knocked down, I think, by the Supreme Court, and they were told to divest themselves of their move. This ruling came in the late 30s, but it didn't go into effect to the late 40s. I think because the war had.
Wow. You don't need Lena Khan to do that. How naive we were in those days. Oh my God, the evil cabal of Hollywood and its movie theaters are going to poison our water and change the
Yeah,
climate.
there was a double whammy for Hollywood in the late 40s because two things happened. One was they had to give up all of their movie theaters, so they would have to fight for screens. And at the exact same time, television came in. So there was this huge fear that people would stop going to the movies and attendance dropped precipitously. And that's when widescreen cinema came out. That was to try to lure people back into the movie theaters. That was when widescreen and 3D, early 3D and Technicolor and Panavision and all those exciting things came in to try to keep people going to the movie theaters.
You know,
Uh,
I remember growing up, my local theater, one of my local theaters was owned by it was a mom and pop store. A
mm.
couple owned it, and it was a great way for them to make a living and raise kids their whole lives, and I'm
Really?
not
It
sure
might
what's be
but tough I mean, a fun way to make a living, but not a very reliable way to make a living, I would have thought.
I don't this is we're talking about the '60s and '70s, so
Yeah.
that 20-year period was not bad. I mean, they had movies like
Um,
Shampoo and Willard,
it was
and
not no, yeah, it was at the '60s was a tough time for Hollywood because they didn't understand their audience. They lost their audience. They made the mistake. The biggest movie of the decade of the '60s was The Sound of Music in 1964, I think, and the studios kept trying to replicate that and kept on getting it wrong very expensively. So they'd make films like
I
Star.
think the punchline to this story, I think either you shared it with me or I read it somewhere, was that what brought them back was a strange independent film with Dennis Hopper and
Easy
Peter
Rider.
Fonda
Easy Rider, yes, and also things like
and
The
Jack Nicholson.
Graduate. Yeah, Jack Nicholson in it. yeah, that was a film that yeah, Easy Rider, 1969. But it's a terrible film, by the way. But it got an audience. It cost under $1 million, made like $100 million. And Hollywood was just stunned by that. Like, what is this film? But even that was after films like The Graduate, 1967, Mike Nichols' second film, which was a huge hit. Bonnie and Clyde, which was a slow burn, but eventually did really well. MASH was an enormous hit. Robert Altman was already in his 50s, probably, been around a long time. But those films caught the imagination of the young audience who had been largely lost to music, and they were
Eh,
not interested in the films that Hollywood was making. I was, because I was a kid. I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and I used to be taken to the movie theater. It was a special occasion. My parents would take us to the movie theater here in London, these big movie palaces, and I loved it. I had no idea I was watching films that lost the studios millions and millions and millions.
I'm the
Uh,
same way.
I
It's
enjoyed
interesting though that your observation was that they lost it to music because you and I both watched and I read a transcript, but watched the video of a charming, wonderful, surprising interview from the New York Times with
Oh,
Mick
yeah,
Jagger.
Mick Jagger.
And
Yeah.
one of the and David Marchese was the interviewer who was great. And one of his observations was that music today, some of the biggest sellers are catalog items. They come from the music catalogs, music that we've all heard before that are stored away on servers,
Mm.
and that music is not iconic today like it was in the 60s and early 70s. It was
Oh,
not,
it was
right?
political
It's
for us. It
different now. It
was
was
cultural,
political then. It was
countercultural. That was what that was.
countercultural.
And and that's interesting to me also because it wasn't a foregone conclusion. The what caught the culture of the 30s, was the movies. That was the cultural strength for young people. I mean,
And when we're talking about the 30s, tell me, what films and which movie stars, actors are we talking about in the 1930s? Just to get a feel for it.
let's
Bringing
keep
Up Babe,
all
The
right.
Thin
Well, I mean, this is a long. I'll have to cut this short because this could be a long discussion. But the different studios represented different kinds of films. So Warner Brothers was, which wasn't as big as MGM, but it was one of the top three. MGM was considered the top studio. It was a sort of Rolls Royce of the film studios. Warner Brothers was the more politically motivated studio, and they were more left wing, and they would make films. They were famous for the gangster films, um, Little Caesar, um, uh, and I was a fugitive from a chain
Chain
gang.
Gang.
Yeah, they were really politic. They were catching the moment, the excuse me, the political moment. This was early in Roosevelt's administration. So I mean, the music was potent as well, of course. But I think the movies really.
Well, that was MGM then, had a different take compared to Warner Brothers.
And well, MGM was run by Louis B. Mayer, who was extremely conservative. He was the best friends with Herbert Hoover, and he was much more conservative and much more kind of moralistic. So they didn't. There were Warner Brothers had those great 1930s musicals, the backstage musicals, the Busby Berkeley musicals, which were rediscovered by sort of stoneheads in the late 60s. People would drop acid and watch a Busby Berkeley movie in a movie theater, and that must have been a lot of fun. But they were, maybe I'm overstating the case. Maybe someone could argue it differently, but I would argue that just as music caught the cultural moment for young people in the late 60s, early 70s, I think movies did that in the 30s. So it was tough for Hollywood to get that audience back, and the films like The Graduate and MASH and Bonnie and Clyde anticipated what was still considered by a lot of people, that great 70s movement in America. We're talking about American films. We're not talking about foreign films, but in
Right.
American. Five Easy
That's
Pieces.
another podcast.
That's a different podcast. Jack Nicholson was, the sort of, what do you call him? The counter, the counter hero. What did we call them? They were, um, uh,
You're losing me.
yeah. Jack Nicholson was a kind of anti-hero.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, 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 in the early 70s, right.
yeah,
5
yeah.
Easy Pieces.
Five Easy Pieces. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Um, going I love the not Going South. Anyway, I'll think of it. He was in some oh, the Last Detail. That's my favorite Jack Nicholson film, The Last
It's a good
Detail.
one. It's a
It's
good
a
one,
great
and
film.
a little known fact about Jack Nicholson is, I mean, he really worked his way up into the movie industry. He was in a couple of Hammer horror films, playing an
Yeah, and
American.
and Roger
He was
Corman films. He was in low budget Corman films too.
I remember there was a scene where he walks into this gothic he knocks on the door, this giant wooden door of this gothic castle, and Peter Lorre, who's a sorcerer, some mysterious, scary guy, opens the door, and he says, "Enchanté, mon ami," something along
I
those
love
lines.
the idea of Jack. I didn't know that Jack Nicholson in a movie with Peter Lorre, who we remember from
And
Casablanca.
Vincent Price. Yeah.
1950 14 Casablanca, 1942 or 43, I think, and then later acted with Jack Nicholson. That's fantastic. So the 1970s, it was a great era. Of course, The Godfather, which was a studio film, that was Paramount. No one thought that would do much business. That was one of the biggest films of the decade. And then by the 1980s, films, the studio, the Hollywood got really kind of stultified, ossified, and I think 1984, I was surprised to read 1984 had the lowest attendance at movie theaters. I think they lost their audience. What do you think of in movies from the 1980s? Things like Flashdance or Wall Street. I mean, those are hits, but there were some big bloated films that didn't do that well.
No, Steven Spielberg had one. He
Well,
had a big
1941
flop.
was
It was called
1941 was
1941, released
that
in the
was
'80s. Yeah.
Yeah, but that for him, that was the exception to the rule because things like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was so much fun. Um, I remember being dragged to that film and actually loving it. Um, so we can anyway. I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but I just so that begat the indie film movement with Sundance in the 1990s, and I think young people rediscovered the movies because they were speaking them. Films like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and the Tarantino films, Reservoir Dogs. These were, scrappy young upstart directors, and that's being repeated now
Well,
with
isn't this kind of a fable of capitalism that some disruptive technology comes in and disturb all the establishment, and, just like it did in the 1960s in the movies with the Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson.
yeah,
What's the name
Easy
of it again?
Rider,
Easy
Easy
Rider,
Rider,
right?
yeah.
So now we're talking about the indie films, Sex, Lives, and Videotape, and the house that Quentin built called Miramax, God
And
rest it.
Robert Rodriguez, who's one of those directors, wrote a book with a great title. It was called Rebel Without a Crew, and I thought that encapsulated it perfectly. These were tiny, these are very small productions that didn't have much of a crew. He was a rebel. These were all rebels without crews. And what you said is absolutely right. It's the technology being what's the word? Interrupted? What did you say?
Disruptive.
Disrupted. Sorry, disrupted. And the two films that now these are the sort of easy riders of our day in a way are Obsession and Back Rooms, both very small budget films, both directed by very young directors who have cut their teeth on YouTube, short YouTube videos, I think.
YouTube, I remember a data point. I think in that Variety article that we both read, I think the budget for Obsession was 750,000
Yeah. It's a
for a
good one. Really?
$450 million return. Not a bad investment. You could
Yeah.
do you can't do better with crypto on that. But,
Yeah. We
I
th that was the
you keep agreeing with me, and it's kind of annoying. Could you
um,
just call me a
I'm
pompous
gonna
twit?
disagree with you for a moment. there's a difference between the production cost and the actual release cost because
Oh, well.
I think it was A24. Someone bought Obsession for
Right.
$15 million, but they did very well on that investment. But it's a great look. I saw it. It's a great looking film for $750,000. And then someone bought it for 15 million, probably spent more money on, promotion or whatever. But I mean, that's a huge return. Backrooms is also, I don't know what the budget. This is probably a slightly larger budget, but it's very small compared to most Hollywood releases. And now everyone, apparently, studios have been buying up YouTube YouTube directors, content providers, throwing money at them to try to come up with, and the next obsession, the next backrooms. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but they'd be curious to see, see
I
what happens.
I read a little bit about the Backrooms and Obsession, um, directors, creators, and how
Mhm.
they had to push back real hard on Hollywood.
In what way?
Basically on, production value.
Mm,
You Hollywood wanted to dress them up and make them look like big movies,
yeah.
and both these young directors warned that that would carry a scent that would scare off audiences, and they were right.
Boy, were they right. They were so
Boy,
right.
were
I mean, these are people who know their audiences, and their audiences are young people who, what, have seen their short videos on YouTube. I mean, they are tested directors in that sense. They're not just coming right out of film school like some of the Sundance guys were. These are people who already had an audience of a kind, right? I didn't know. I had never heard of these guys. I'm not I'm not part of their demographic, but I liked Obsession, and I'm looking forward to seeing Backrooms. We were talking about it recently. I called it Boardrooms, and
it's
he said
a corporate thriller.
that's the corporate thriller version of Backrooms. Backrooms, yes. Are you going to see Backrooms?
I intend to quickly, but this weekend I have tickets to, another feature that is drawing audiences in advance. It's drawing praise in advance, and it's drawing controversy. It's a 2 millennial old epic. Can you name that epic, young man?
The Odyssey. The Odyssey, the Christopher Nolan. What's
He's a
interesting about that too is because he shot it in IMAX, and that is sort of the modern version of the widescreen that I was talking about earlier, that try to get people back to the movie theaters
No,
in
actually,
the
and
in
maybe
50.
you can help me with this. He not only shot it in IMAX, but like One Battle After Another, he also shot it in 70 millimeters. So isn't that compounding the complexity of movie making? And
Yeah,
what's the
absolutely.
benefit of 70 millimeter? It's the
Well,
aspect
it's
ratio, right?
no, it's not the aspect ratio. I think it's the grain. It's the finer grain. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a clearer. You can shoot on the smallest camera you want. You can have an extremely wide screen. It's about, I think,
Uh,
the fine grain of the image, and I think I might be wrong. I believe One Battle After Another was shot on film, not on digital, which is a huge difference
Correct.
as well.
Correct.
Um, and that's sort of going back to movies where these are. Yeah, Paul Thomas Anderson is, a film nerd, and he would have grown up watching, celluloid films on celluloid, and maybe wanting to. By the way, one battle after another was one film that did get me into the movie theater. I went to my local posh expensive cinema. I saw that. I guess that was that last year, and I saw Bobby, not Bobby Supreme. It was Marty Supreme in a movie theater.
Well,
Uh,
it's interesting because where I'm 8 of us are attending this film, and we're in a theater-rich city, and but we could not get into an IMAX this weekend. It had been sold they'd been sold out
a
since
year ago.
Tuesday.
Oh,
There were a lot of sales a year ago, and we talked about that too. Even Tony Scott at the New York Times, who's their sort of film critic at large, I read an interview with him today saying that wherever he lives, the nearest IMAX is a long, long drive. so he won't get to it. Lucky he's not the chief movie critic. He'd have to take that drive. But one of the chief movie critics m- gave a glowing review at the New York Times. I haven't checked out any
Oh,
other
it's gotten
outlets
amazing
yet.
reviews. Yeah. No, did you wanna
And,
read them after you've seen the film? Are you gonna so what are you're
and
not seeing
it's
them
also
either?
it's kind of fun because it comes with controversy. And I need I share who objects to it? Let's just put it this way. Tony Scott put it best: a preemptive strike, ideological strike against the film. For guess why? Colorblind casting, or is it the script? It's something that MAGA objects to on foundational terms, which is emotionally juvenile and
Well, I think it ends up
intellectually vacant.
makes them look really silly, but as soon as the film opens, you know, if it does, if it's gotten good reviews, which this has across the board, all of that controversy just,
It
floats
just
away.
dries up.
It
But
drives.
then, as I was reading the review, I was looking at the commenters. And here's one that appears to come from England, and it crystallizes your theory about
Mm,
the movies. And I'm gonna
what's
read
that?
it. The Missus and I, maybe you should read it, you could do it with an English accent. The Missus and
Mhm.
I have not been to a theater or playhouse since COVID. We watch mostly on Blu-ray or via stream. The Odyssey is a personal favorite, perhaps the best book I have ever read. When I learnt with a T,
Yeah,
learnt this film was greenlit, I couldn't imagine anyone taking on such a massive project. I imagine it will be the best big budgeted project released this year. Both my wife and I are attending a screening this weekend. I wholly expect the film, well, my wife and I, sorry, typo from the commenter, I back into the theater. It will lure us back in the theater on a regular basis like we did when we first started dating
well,
40
there. I mean,
years ago.
he's well, that's interesting that he's already assuming that they're gonna return going, this one film is gonna return them to the cinema, again and again. What's telling about that comment is he mentions Blu-rays. Anybody who is at home watches things on Blu-ray is a true film fan. I
Yep,
mean, I think I gave you a DVD not long ago, and you don't even have a DVD player like most people, like most smart, normal people. You don't have a DVD player,
that's
and,
better. And insulting is welcome here. We like to keep the podcast lively.
and I'm
Go
a
on, you
I'm
bastard.
an old-fashioned nerd. I have all my music on CDs, which I download on my laptop, which takes forever. I watch films on CDs and Blu-rays. But here's someone who wrote into the newspaper saying, mentioned Blu-ray, so they are film fans, and it took a film like The Odyssey to get them back into the cinema. That is great. That's wonderful, and that's exactly what Christopher Nolan, would want. And that's what remember just after the lockdown, Tom Cruise um, had finished making the Maverick. What was that called? The Top Gun Maverick, which he insisted on being released theatrically. I think the studios were really nervous about theatrical release then, and they wanted to go put it on streaming. And he said, "No, this is he wanted to get people back into the cinema. Good for him. He was right." And it's taken a few years for that to come around. But the Odyssey it's an event film, right? It's certainly if it's IMAX, it must be. You're not seeing it in IMAX, but you're seeing it where on a big
We're
screen
gonna
somewhere.
in a standard screen because that's the only way we could get 8 people into the theater.
It's gonna look great though anyway. I mean, it's gonna have, Dolby Atmos. It's gonna have all that the great. That's something that cinemas do that you can't even if you have a 5.1 surround sound system, which I don't have. I want to get at some point. But the sound now in movie theaters, and you can attest to this, you're more of a moviegoer than I am. The sound is just spectacular, right? It's really
It's also
immersive.
interesting, as I was shopping, again, we have this huge volume of cinemas in where I live, and you can shop on Fandango, you can shop by format. So you could look at standard, IMAX,
Oh,
I think what they
really?
call premium, which would be IMAX 70 millimeter. And
Wow.
as I am looking closely because I'm the one in charge of getting tickets, so it's nerve-wracking because everybody has preferences on where to sit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huh.
I see that the Regal chain has a proprietary format that is a little like IMAX, but not, but
Oh,
includes seats
what's it
that
called?
rumble, seats rumble. It's there's a
Rumble.
name, Regal proprietary
Regal Rumbling.
shaky seats or something, I don't know.
Wow. That was in the 70s. But then they briefly have, what was it called?
It's
It
called
wasn't
Sense Around.
Sense So I never saw anything in Sense but like Earthquake. There was a film called Earthquake, and
I saw Earthquake Quake in the theater, and the Sense Around seemed really stupid to me. It felt like a bad amusement park ride.
I remember the early 3D. They re-released some 3D films from the 50s, and you'd wear these glasses that had different color. There was a blue and green or red and green, and that was to make the 3D effect work. And it just it give you a headache after a while.
And a
Um,
red mark on your nose.
later, that was another thing to try to get people back to the movie theater when the first Avatar came out in 2005, whatever it was. That was they brought back an improved 3D. Can I ask you how much they charge you for the tickets? What do you pay to see a movie
I
theater
think
in
we
New York?
was down to about $17 a ticket, so not far away from
Not
UK prices.
nothing. Wow. I mean, not nothing. Um, I remember the outrage
It'd be nice
when
if you could go to the movies and they'd give you a slice of Stilton cheese or something to take home. All this
champagne.
smelly
You
cheese in
got
the
free
theater, it'd be
champagne.
terrific.
Well, there
Or a
is the
Cornish pie, or what are they called? Cornish pie? Cornish
Cornish
pixie
pasty.
pie?
Cornish pasty.
Cornish
Cornish pasty.
pasties.
But they wouldn't, here there are certain cinemas like the Hampstead Cinema, which used to be a theater, stage theater, and now it's one of these upmarket posh cinemas, and you can get, food brought to your seat, and, that makes the price go up. I was reading in that article in Variety, they mentioned, and you can tell me if you've run into they mentioned this new business of popcorn buckets, which prices range from 20 to $80, and the boxes can command nearly double that on eBay. These are film related buckets, so they have but pictures of the film. I don't know. There was a bucket made out of gold, platinum, wood. Have you seen these? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a big
Well
business, $100 million business for the AMC theater chain now.
well, they're hand carved in India, and they're shipped in from an NGO that distributes all the profits to poor families in
Yeah.
Iowa because
No,
we're
no, it
getting
isn't.
poorer in this country. No, I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't know what they're
Oh, okay. I thought that was the thing. I'd never heard of that before.
One thing that
So
impresses me about Variety, I don't read it as often as I should, is when they run these large features, these sweeping features to make a proclamation about the movie industry. They, they quote major, not only studio personnel, but we got Seth Rogen commenting and Richard the director, Linklater. So
that's Rogan.
they're
I'm not a
Seth
studio
Rogen.
chief, but I play one on television. Maybe they thought he was what was the name of that fictional his fictional studio? It was a Cosmopolitan. It's not Cosmopolitan.
Atlantic? Was it Atlantic Studios?
No, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, it's, he's the go-to guy. I mean, that was such a hit. The studio. We both really like that. That's coming back in the fall, I think. But
Hey,
what
I
you know,
is it I'm gonna ask you, is it time, for headquakes?
sure, sure. Do you have one?
Um, and maybe an advance apology to viewers whose eardrums split from the last episode because we didn't have the levels right.
Well, we're taking
Um,
no more boom. We're not doing. We're taking out the boom now. I think the boom has been laid to rest. It's boomed its last boom.
I
Um,
is that right?
yeah,
It's
bitten the dust.
technologically too okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, do you have one or should I
I
begin?
I've got one. I've got one.
Okay.
It's just a book I finished reading. It's 10 years old. It's called 1971, Never a Dull Moment. It's written by a British music journalist who came of age. He turned 21 in 1971. And the premise, it's kind of a loosely based premise of the book, is that 1971 was the greatest year in rock. He doesn't quite make the case, but it's a very entertaining kind of cultural history and industry appraisal of the rock business in 1971, which was a good year for rock. It's the Who's Next and
So it
Exile
was a
on.
little like, making a proclamation. It's like, Donald Trump saying last night that there's fraud in the election system, but not providing any evidence.
Well,
Was there
he
any evidence
no,
what
no,
of
no,
the
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
1971, which bands did he attribute
yes.
to this
Well,
greatest
as I
year
just
ever?
said, yeah, there was evidence. The Who's Neck, Who's Next, and after Live It Leads and the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. Some people consider that their greatest album, and the rise of soft rock and James Taylor. And no, it was a good year, but there are a lot of good years. If you sort of ignore the premise and then just enjoy the sort of history of the business at that point, he doesn't get everything about America right. He mentions, I think, two cities at one point, Nashville and Carolina. It doesn't seem there's
Whoops.
no such
Doesn't
city as
specify which
Carolina.
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 Where were the fact checkers?
Well, he's a fact checkers, but he's very good on the English scene because he was, in his 20s during in the 70s. So you can capture, the bands like the Who playing live at Leeds. Live at Leeds, maybe their most famous, one of the most famous live recordings ever released was recorded at Leeds University, not in Leeds City, not in the big venue. All of those bands played at universities. Anyway, it's an entertaining book. The author's name is David Hepworth, 1971. Never, I think in America it's just called Never a Dull Moment. They took out the 1971 probably just as well. Yes, what's your headquake, Mr. Jalamas?
Well, you recently, um, cited, Billy Joel because he had been
Mm.
omitted from a top list in a major daily, and I stumbled across a Kanye West song called "Power," in which he samples King Crimson, 20th century schizoid man. And then while I was in Europe, um, an English-speaking Spaniard helped me gain entry to a 100-year-old pub, and he was wearing a King Crimson shirt. He he had recently attended a reunion concert, so I got I got sucked down a little bit of a rabbit hole on Robert Fripp,
Fripp,
who is
Frippertronics.
a legendary guitarist, and, I'm not sure how he fits in, except that his reputation in those years, which would have been the late '60s and '70s, he was sort of like a on-demand magical guitarist
Yeah, he played with
who could
David Bowie. He's got some really great guitar stuff in
play.
some of the albums.
Right, his guitar was in a famous David Bowie song that escapes me, but a lot of people really think about the
I think Voice,
experimental, very
Voice of
successful
Soul.
experimental, work he did with Brian Eno,
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah. There's a name,
so,
Robert
yeah,
Fripp.
that is a strange name, Fripp and Eno, and it's someone worth maybe looking into.
Yes, I've been listening to a lot of early Eno lately. Sort of on the same subject. I mean, I'm a huge Roxy Music fan, and I recently read an interview with their guitarist Phil Manzanera, and he said he had one guitar lick from a pretty obscure track, not from Roxy Music, that was sampled by I think Jay Z and Kanye West, and he made more money from that sampling than his entire career at Roxy Music, which was a 30-year career. Yeah, that's how much money you can make in that business. And he was happy to let it be sampled. Incredible. That's the business. I'll stick with
Well,
rock music myself, but anyway.
on that
Great.
profound note,
Yeah,
shall we
good.
sign off?
Yes. Well, thanks for listening and watching. This has been Boomer Has It. I'm JB Miller in London.
And I'm Jim Jalamas in Brooklyn at the Twisted Spine Bookstore.
Thanks. Bye-bye.